Hey everybody, this is how to remove the front clamshell on a Lotus Elise. Two gotchas on this project. First one is there's a shim right here between these two panels. And once you remove this section of the clamshell, the door, when it opens and closes, can hit this part right here. So be really careful of that, because that can damage your body panel. The second one is the antenna for the radio is attached to the clamshell. And it's really easy to miss. So just make sure you look for that antenna plug where they plug together and pull that apart, and make sure also that the antenna itself is not attached to anything else. Alright, and with that said, let's get straight to the point. Start by removing the two access panels on the front of the car by removing this screw. Pull out the access panel to the side. Note that the access panel is held in place by this long clip that attaches into the louvered panel, and these two pins here and here, which fit into these two grommets. Remove the louvered panel. Remove this one screw and this screw as well. Both the driver's side and passenger side are the same procedure, so I'm only going to show one side of the car. With those two screws removed, the louvered panel can pop out as shown, and then it can slide out. Please note that it may be stuck to the one on the other side. This is two pieces. Here's the two pieces outside of the car, so you can see how they attach together. There's no clip here, but those little tabs can get stuck and held in pretty tight with each other. Remove these two little plastic tray pieces. There's two screws that hold them in place. Here's what the car looks like after you've removed the access panels and all of the parts from the top. Remove the wheels. Jack up one or both sides of the car. You can do one side at a time or both at the same time. With the wheel removed, remove the wheel liner. It's attached with these three fasteners. This one right here in the light near my hand. You can barely see it. And then over on the other side towards the back of the car, there's two more. There they are. With the fasteners removed, pull this access panel down and out to remove it. With the access panel removed, you can now remove the wheel well liner. Pull this gasket around and down. It's better with both hands, unlike I'm doing at the moment. It comes out pretty easy if you have both hands. Once it's out, pull it out. On the passenger side, please note that there is an electrical connection right here that needs to be unplugged before the wheel liner will come out. There is not one on the driver's side. With the wheel liner out, you can now remove this hex head bolt and then unclip the oil cooler lines here and here. You can also remove the headlight bolts. There's 3 socket head bolts that hold the headlight housing in place. You do not need to remove the nuts that are on the studs. With the 3 bolts removed, you can now pull off the headlight cover. It just kind of pops right off, pretty easy. You know, maybe a little wiggle. With the headlight cover removed, you can now access this bolt. Release the blinker by inserting a metal rod or screwdriver through this hole to push and release the clip that holds the blinker in place. I'm using a small extension here. It's kind of tricky to find the right spot to push, but once you get it, it pops right out. Here's a closer look at how that clip looks. The blinker clips are known to break off, so your blinker might be held in another way. Remove the bulb from the blinker housing and just leave the bulb in place. You will need to disconnect the headlights with this plug right here. Now is a good time to unbolt the front undertray from the front clam. Here, here, and here are the 3 bolts that hold it in place. Remove a tow hook if you have one. On the back side, you need to remove this bolt, or at the very least loosen it, and also completely remove this bolt here. The 10mm bolt is a very tricky bolt to remove. This is probably the hardest bolt to remove on the entire project. You can loosen it with a regular wrench, however, that will not get it loose enough to pull it out easily. Once it's loose, the box end of the wrench will not have enough resistance to do the ratcheting mechanism properly. Because this is a really difficult task, I actually designed a wrench to do this. I will talk more about that at the end of the video. Now is a good time to note that there are shims that go behind this bolt right here. This is what it looks like after the clam is removed, just so you can see. Remove this bolt and remove the sensors for the access panels. I find rather than disconnecting the sensor, it's easier to just pull the whole sensor out through the top. You can push it out pretty easily from the bottom, as I'm demonstrating here. Just disconnect it and push it back through. You need to unbolt these two little bolts here above the heater core. It is also best to remove that heater core hose that looks like a dryer vent hose. Now is a good time to note that there's an antenna that is on the hood. On my car, the antenna was zip tied to this hose here. It runs down here and it connects right here. Your car may differ, as this was clearly worked on before on my car. With that piece removed, the front clamshell can now be popped off. It pops off right here over the impact structure. This lip needs to be pulled up gently over the impact structure. I can't do it on the video with only one hand. You need both hands to do this. Once it's popped off, it'll look like this, and the front will slide off a little bit. Now is a good time to check for anything that's still connected that you may have missed. Here's what the car will look like with the clam starting to be removed. Once the clam is removed, you can just slide it off towards the front of the car. Now is a good time to note that this bolt doesn't need to be removed entirely, and that also the clamshell can scrape across the radiator here and catch on the lip here. Note that the antenna on my car was still attached and zip tied into the crash structure here. Here's what the car looks like once the clamshell is removed. Note that once the clamshell is removed, this piece may contact the door. The shim holds this part back from hitting the door under normal circumstances, so you need to be really careful with opening and closing these doors once the clamshell is removed. I find it's easiest to store the clamshell upside down, especially on another car. Here's what it looks like. Remember this bolt that was really hard to get out? This one was so difficult that I decided to make a little wrench just for this job. This is what I call the little handy wrench. It's basically designed just to do finger tightening of a small bolt like that, where your ratchet won't have enough resistance to click. And it's too tight to get another kind of wrench in there. This works simply by just turning this little wheel here, and it turns both ends of the wrench. For this car, we really only need the 10mm, but it made sense to make a double-ended wrench for this design. It uses a belt drive and a bearing in the middle so that you can finger tighten bolts. It's not really designed to do a lot of torque, but it can get it close enough so that you can get your ratchet in there and finish up the job, or an open-ended wrench to finish up the job. Here's how we use it on this one little bolt. It's still a tight fit, but it makes it significantly easier. And that is how you remove the front clamshell from a Lotus Elise. Putting it back on is the opposite of taking it off. The only difference is that while I was able to take the clamshell off by myself, I was able to lift the whole thing off all by myself, putting it back on is a lot harder. The body panels above the radiator have a tendency to scrape across the radiator when you're trying to install it if you're not super careful. And also, it's really hard to get these connection points right here to line up and to fall into place. So I highly recommend that even if you do the first part, removing it yourself, that you get a friend to help for putting it back on. If you like this video, go ahead and please hit that like button. If you really like this video, maybe try out that subscribe button.